Varix's primary manipulator froze above the emergency console as the biometric readings scrolled across his vision. "That's impossible. Run the scan again." "Commander, the readings are consistent." His second officer's voice carried an edge Varix had never heard before. "Vault 7 breach confirmed. All 12 Kython cubs are loose in Maintenance Bay 4, and there's a human in there with them. Evacuate the sector. Now, full lockdown protocols." "Sir." The officer's antenna flattened against his carapace. "The human is... The cubs are on top of her, completely covering her. She can't move." Varix felt his respiratory system stutter. Kython cubs. The most lethal juvenile predators in 47 documented star systems. The species that had conquered half the Andromeda Rim before they were old enough to speak. The same cubs that had killed 3 handlers last cycle during a routine feeding. And they were piled on top of a human. "Get me a visual, get me the Kython liaison, get me every xenobiologist on this station and..." He stopped as the security feed populated on the main screen. The human woman lay on her back on the maintenance bay floor, completely invisible beneath a writhing mass of chitinous bodies. 12 Kython cubs, each the size of a Terran wolf, had swarmed over her sleeping form. Their razor-edged carapaces gleamed under the bay lights. Their feeding mandibles flexed with each breath. "How long has she been in there?" Varix demanded. "Her shift started 6 hours ago. She logged into Bay 4 to repair a coolant leak and..." The officer checked his display. "No further activity logged, sir." 6 hours. Varix's voice went flat. "She's been under those cubs for 6 hours. Biometric scan shows she's still alive, Commander. Heart rate is... Actually, it's normal for human sleep patterns." That couldn't be right. Nothing was right about this situation. Varix had studied the Kython protocols personally when the Empire had agreed to station their cubs here for socialization training. The cubs imprinted on the first life form they encountered after hatching, an evolutionary adaptation that made them bond with their parents and learn hunting behavior. But these cubs had already killed their assigned handlers. They were scheduled for termination tomorrow. "Sir, if we attempt extraction and wake either the human or the cubs will imprint on her immediately," Varix finished. His mind raced through scenarios, each worse than the last. And if a human becomes the bonded parent of Kython warrior cubs, the Kython Empire will consider it an act of war, his officer completed quietly. The console chimed with an incoming priority signal. Varix didn't need to check the identifier. He already knew. "Commander Varix." The voice that filled the bridge carried the weight of 300 conquered worlds. "Explain why my cubs are unsupervised in a maintenance bay with a member of a Death World species." Varix straightened his posture, mandibles tight. "Ambassador Thornak, we have a developing situation. I am watching your security feed now." A pause that stretched too long. "Your human has survived 6 hours of direct contact with juvenile Kythons. How? We don't know. She appears to be sleeping." "Sleeping?" Thornak's tone suggested Varix had just claimed his human was juggling neutron stars. Under 12 imprinted cubs. Sleeping. Her biometrics indicate... I know what her biometrics indicate, Commander. I also know what should be happening. Those cubs killed their last handlers because the handlers showed fear. Fear triggers the hunting response. Your human should be dead 20 times over." On the screen, one of the cubs shifted position, its serrated limb moving across where the human's throat would be. Varix forced himself to keep watching. "We cannot wake them," Varix said. "If the cubs fully imprint on her..." Too late for that concern. Thornak's image appeared on a secondary screen, his scaled features set in grim lines. "Imprinting begins with prolonged contact. After 6 hours, Commander, those cubs already think that human is their parent. Then we have a diplomatic crisis. We have something far stranger than that." Thornak leaned closer to his own screen, studying the feed. "Those cubs are purring." Varix felt his respiratory system freeze again. "Kython cubs don't purr." "No, they don't. But watch the mandible movements. Listen to the resonance frequency." Thornak's voice carried something Varix had never associated with the Kython Empire. Confusion. That is a contentment response. I have studied 17,000 cubs across my career. I have never seen that behavior. What does it mean? It means your human is doing something that contradicts every piece of Kython biology we understand. The security feed showed movement. Varix's entire bridge crew went silent as the mass of cubs began to shift. Slowly, carefully, a human hand emerged from beneath the pile. Then an arm. Then a face. A woman in her late 30s, dark hair matted with sleep, expression groggy and confused. "Oh," the human said, her voice carrying clearly through the audio feed. "Oh, wow. Hey there, little guys. Do not move." Varix transmitted directly to the bay's speakers. "Remain completely still. You are in extreme danger." "Danger?" The human, Elena, her file said station plumber, looked around at the cubs with a sleep fuzzy smile. "These guys, they're adorable." "Those are Kython cubs," Varix tried again. "They are classified as Class 7 lethal organisms. They have killed—" Yeah, I can see the tags on the vault." Elena sat up slowly, and every being on the bridge tensed. The cubs moved with her, adjusting their positions but not attacking. "Someone left the door open. That's a safety violation, by the way. I'm going to have to file a report." She was filing reports, while covered in apex predators. While those predators nuzzled against her, hands like she was. "She's petting them," Thornak said, his voice strangled. She just scratched one behind its dorsal ridge." The cub in question had rolled partially onto its side, exposing the vulnerable joint between carapace plates. A position that required absolute trust. A position Varix had never seen a Kython cub take with anyone except its birth parent. Elena continued scratching, seemingly oblivious to the cosmic laws she was violating. "You guys are just babies, huh? Got out of your room for some exploring?" She yawned. "I get it. I'd be bored too if I was locked up all day." "Commander, what are your orders?" his officer asked quietly. Varix watched as Elena picked up one of the cubs, actually lifted it into her arms, and the cub made a trilling sound that shouldn't exist in Kython physiology. "Get me every xenobiologist on this station," Varix said slowly, "and someone find out how humans domesticated their predators. I think we're going to need that information very soon." On the screen, Elena had apparently decided the maintenance bay floor was uncomfortable. She stood, cubs flowing around her feet like a chitinous tide, and stretched. "All right, so who's hungry? Because you guys look way too skinny for predator cubs." "She thinks they're underfed," Thornak said faintly. "She thinks warriors of the Kython Empire are underfed." "Are they?" Varix found himself asking. The silence from the Kython ambassador spoke volumes. Elena had found the cubs' feeding station, examining the automated dispenser with a critical eye. "Oh no. This is terrible. You can't feed babies on a starvation schedule. What kind of setup is this?" "It is traditional Kython practice," Thornak said, his voice carrying a defensive edge. "Hunger strengthens the hunting instinct. It teaches them to be stressed and weak." Elena interrupted, apparently hearing the transmission. "You got a manual override on this thing, Commander? These babies need actual food." Varix looked at Thornak's image. The ambassador's expression had gone carefully blank, the Kython equivalent of profound internal conflict. "She's not wrong," Thornak finally said. "The cubs are below optimal weight by 17%. It's traditional." "Override granted," Varix said, making a decision that felt simultaneously insane and inevitable. "Elena, you have access to the feeding system." "Thanks, boss." Elena worked the controls, and the dispenser began producing nutrient paste at 3 times the standard rate. The cubs swarmed toward it, making sounds that definitely weren't in any Kython behavioral database. They were eating, not fighting over food, not establishing dominance hierarchy. Just eating, like normal babies. "How is she doing this?" Varix asked, not really expecting an answer. "I don't know," Thornak replied. But I'm beginning to suspect my empire doesn't either. Elena watched the cubs eat with the practiced eye of someone who'd raised half a dozen foster dogs back on Earth. Yeah, you guys were starving. Poor babies. She glanced up at the nearest security camera. Seriously, who designed this feeding protocol? Because we need to have words. Thornek's voice came through the speakers, tight, with controlled offense. That protocol has been refined over 6,000 years of Kython tradition. Well, your 6,000-year tradition is wrong. Elena scratched one cub behind its dorsal ridge as it finished eating. Back home, we figured out you don't starve babies into being strong. You feed them right, socialize them properly, and they grow up healthy. Did that with wolves 40,000 years ago. These are not wolves. No, they're scarier. But the principle's the same. They're pack predators with social bonding instincts. Elena picked up another cub, examining its carapace. See these stress fractures? This is malnutrition damage. And this one's got a respiratory rattle. You're not making them stronger, you're breaking them. On the bridge, Varix watched his xenobiology team arrive, each face registering the same shocked expression as they saw the feed. Yvette, his chief biologist, moved directly to his side. Commander, this violates every documented behavior pattern for Kython cubs. They should be— I know what they should be doing, Varix interrupted. Watch what they're actually doing. Elena had sat down cross-legged on the floor, and the cubs were climbing over her again. But this time, everyone could see it wasn't an attack or even an accident of sleep. The cubs were seeking contact, deliberately, happily. They're playing, Yvette whispered. Kython cubs don't play. They practice combat. They establish hierarchy through violence. They don't. One cub had grabbed Elena's tool belt and was trying to pull a wrench free. Elena laughed, actually laughed, and gently wrestled it away. Nice try, buddy. That's not a toy. She pulled a ration bar from her pocket instead, broke it into pieces, and let the cub chase the pieces across the floor. She's teaching it to hunt, Thornek said, his voice strange. That's a hunting training exercise, but she made it playful. Is that wrong? Varix asked. I don't know anymore. Thornak's image showed him leaning forward, watching intently. We train cubs through blood trials. First kill at 3 months. Dominance fights daily. The weak are culled. It's how we've always done it. And how many cubs survive to adulthood? Elena asked, apparently still listening. She'd moved to examining each cub individually now, checking joints and carapace integrity with careful hands. Thornek didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quiet. 43%. It weeds out genetic weakness. It weeds out 57% of your population. Elena looked directly at the camera. That's not strength, that's waste. These babies are healthy, or they would be with proper care. You're killing them with tradition. You dare? Yeah, I dare, because I'm holding a baby right now that you people were going to execute tomorrow for aggressive behavior. Elena lifted one cub, the smallest of the group. It nuzzled against her chest, making that impossible purring sound. This one's scared, not aggressive, scared, because nobody ever taught him that the world wasn't just violence. The cub's eyes, 6 of them, were half closed in contentment. Its feeding mandibles, which should have been seeking flesh, were relaxed. Yvette's voice was barely audible. She's mothering them. Actual parental bonding behavior. I didn't think humans could do that cross-species with something so alien. We did it with everything back home, Elena said simply. Wolves, big cats, bears, even reptiles. If it's a baby, we figure out how to care for it. It's kind of our thing. Thornek materialized on the station 6 hours later, arriving with an entire delegation of Kython specialists. Varix met them at the docking bay, mandibles tight with apprehension. The situation remains stable, Varix reported. Elena has fed the cubs 3 more times. They've gained noticeable mass. No aggressive incidents. Take me to them. Thornek's tone allowed no argument. The maintenance bay had been transformed. Elena had raided station supplies to create what she called enrichment. scattered tools for the cubs to investigate, elevated platforms for climbing, even a water feature she'd rigged from a coolant pump. The cubs moved through this environment with an ease that seemed impossible for creatures raised in sterile vault conditions. Thornak stopped at the bay entrance, his entire delegation freezing behind him. Elena was in the center of the space, a cub draped across her shoulders like a bizarre scarf, while two others wrestled at her feet. She was explaining something to them in that sing-songy voice humans used with babies. "That's right, gentle teeth. We don't bite our friends. Good boy. Yes, you're such a good boy." "They understand her," one of Thornak's specialists breathed. "Look at the behavioral responses. They're processing language context. Kython cubs don't develop language comprehension until 8 months, another specialist said. These are 5 months old. Maybe they would develop faster if you talked to them instead of just throwing them in combat trials," Elena called out, waving at the group. "Hey there, you must be the cub experts. Want to come meet your babies properly?" Thornak stepped forward slowly, and every cub's head swiveled toward him. Their postures shifted. Not aggressive, but alert. Protective. "They've bonded with her completely," Thornak said. "They see us as potential threats to their parent." "Well, you were going to kill them yesterday," Elena pointed out. "So their instincts aren't wrong." She stood, the cub on her shoulders adjusting its position with practiced ease. "But hey, let's try something. Can you crouch down? You're being all looming and scary." "I am a Kython warrior ambassador. I do not crouch." "Then you're not meeting these babies properly." Elena shrugged, and the cub purred. "Your choice." Varix watched something extraordinary happen. Thornak, decorated veteran of 40 campaigns, lowered himself to the floor. His specialists followed suit, creating a less threatening profile. "Okay, babies," Elena said gently. "These are Kythons too, like you. They're here to learn about you. Can we show them how good you're doing?" She walked toward Thornak, cubs flowing around her feet. One, the smallest, the one scheduled for execution, approached the ambassador directly. Thornak extended a manipulator, and the cub sniffed it cautiously. Then, shocking everyone present, it rubbed its dorsal ridge against Thornak's scaled hand. "By the ancient void," Thornak whispered. "It's seeking affection. From me. Because you're being gentle," Elena explained. "You stopped being scary and started being safe. That's all they needed, to feel safe." She paused. "How old are you when you start the combat trials?" 3 months after hatching." 3 months. Elena's voice went flat. "They're babies for at least a year, probably longer. And you start trying to make them kill at 3 months. It is tradition. It's child abuse." Elena cut him off. "I don't care what species you are. Babies need security, nutrition, socialization, and play. Not blood trials, not starvation schedules, not culling." Thornak stared at the cub still nuzzling his hand. "Our empire was built on these traditions. Maybe it's time to build something better." The silence in the maintenance bay stretched until one of the cubs, the one Elena had been calling tiny, despite its objectively lethal nature, climbed directly into Thornak's lap. The ambassador's entire body went rigid. "Don't tense up," Elena said quickly. "Just breathe normally. Put your hand on his back, gentle pressure. Yeah, like that." Thornak's manipulator settled on the cub's carapace with visible uncertainty. The cub's purring intensified, a resonant frequency that seemed to vibrate through the floor. "This sound," one of Thornak's specialists said, her voice shaking. "Commander Thornak, this is a familial bonding response. It only occurs between cubs and their birth mothers in the wild. We've never documented it in captive populations." "Because you never gave them reason to make it," Elena said. She sat down beside Thornak, 3 cubs immediately swarming into her lap. "They're not little killing machines you wind up and point at enemies. They're children. Really dangerous children, yeah, but still children." Yvette had been recording everything, her own scientific training clearly at war with what she was witnessing. "Elena, can you explain your methodology? For the record?" Methodology. Elena laughed. I'm not doing anything special. Look, back on Earth, we domesticated wolves. Not because we were stronger or smarter than them, but because we understood pack dynamics. Wolves are social. They need hierarchy, security, and belonging. So we gave them that, and over time, they became dogs. These aren't wolves, Thornek said, but his voice had lost its edge. Tiny had fallen asleep in his lap. No, but they're pack predators with similar social needs. Watch. Elena gently moved 2 cubs that were starting to roughhouse. See that? They were getting too aggressive, so I redirect. Not punish, redirect. Give them something else to focus on. She pulled out a maintenance cable and dragged it across the floor. Both cubs immediately pounced on it, play-fighting over the prize. You're teaching them to control their hunting instinct, another specialist observed. Channeling it into acceptable play behavior. Exactly. They're babies. They need to learn boundaries, but through guidance, not trauma. Elena looked directly at Thornek. You want to know the real difference between your approach and mine? You were trying to make them afraid. I'm teaching them to trust. Thornek watched Tiny sleep, his manipulator unconsciously stroking the cub's back in a soothing rhythm. Our empire. We believe strength comes from overcoming fear, from surviving hardship. Sure, when you're an adult. But babies? Elena shook her head. Babies who grow up afraid don't become strong. They become traumatized. They survive, maybe, but they're broken. And broken things don't build empires. They just perpetuate cycles of violence. You're saying our entire cultural foundation is wrong. I'm saying your cultural foundation is eating your own children. Elena's voice was gentle but firm. 43% survival rate, remember. What happens to species that actually care for their young properly? Yvette checked her datapad. Among social predator species with active parental care, survival rates average 87 to 93% to adulthood. The numbers hung in the air like an accusation. Twice as many, one of the specialists whispered. We could have twice as many warriors, twice as many scientists, twice as many people, Elena interrupted. Not tools, people. That's the other thing you're missing. These babies aren't weapons you're forging. They're individuals with personalities and needs. She pointed to each cub in the turn. That one's curious, always investigating new things. That one's cautious, likes to observe before engaging. This one's a natural leader, organizes the others during play. And Tiny here? He's sensitive, feels things deeply. In your system, he'd be culled for weakness. But look at how he bonds, how he reads emotions. That's not weakness, that's emotional intelligence. Thornek's specialists were frantically taking notes, recording data, scanning the cubs. Their scientific detachment was crumbling as they watched behaviors they'd been taught were impossible. Commander Thornek, one specialist said, his voice tight. The cubs' stress hormone levels are 68% lower than baseline. Cognitive development markers are accelerated. Bone density is improving. This human's approach is producing objectively superior results in every measurable category. In 6 hours, another added. She's reversed malnutrition damage that should take weeks to heal. Because I fed them properly and made them feel safe, Elena said. That's it. That's the whole secret. Food, safety, love. Same thing every baby needs, whether they're human, wolf, or galaxy-conquering space predator. Varix had been observing from the bay entrance, but now he stepped forward. Ambassador, we need to discuss implications. If Elena's methods are this effective, then every Kython cub-rearing facility in the Empire is operating on flawed principles, Thornek finished. He looked down at Tiny, still sleeping peacefully. Do you understand what you're asking? To overturn 6,000 years of tradition, to admit that we've been wrong? I'm not asking anything, Elena said. I'm just showing you what's possible. What you do with that information is up to you. One of the cubs brought Elena a tool, a sonic wrench she'd been using earlier. It dropped the tool in her lap and looked at her expectantly. Oh, you want to play fetch? Okay, buddy. Elena tossed the wrench gently across the bay. The cub bounded after it, retrieved it, and brought it back. Good job. Yes, such a good hunter. That's a cooperative hunting exercise, a specialist breathed. Retrieve and return. It's teaching pack coordination, but it's structured as play. The cub is learning essential skills while experiencing positive reinforcement. We teach that through live prey scenarios, Thornek said quietly. Cubs that fail to coordinate, fail. And this way, cubs that take longer to learn don't die, Elena countered. They just need more practice. Different individuals learn at different speeds. That's normal. Thornek stood slowly, carefully transferring Tiny to one of his specialists. The cub stirred but didn't wake, accepting the new holder with drowsy trust. I need to contact the Empire Council. This changes everything. Does it? Elena asked. Because I'm just a plumber. I fix pipes. I'm not a xenobiologist or a cultural expert. I'm just someone who knows babies need care. If I can figure this out, why hasn't your empire? Because we didn't want to, Thornek said, and the admission seemed to cost him. We built our identity on strength through suffering. To question that would be to question everything we are. Maybe it's time to question. Elena gestured at the cubs, now playing peacefully throughout the bay. Look at them. Really look. Are they weaker because they're happy? Or are they stronger because they're not constantly terrified? One cub scaled a climbing platform Elena had built, then called out to the others. They swarmed up together, coordinating their movements with fluid precision. At the top, they arranged themselves in a defensive formation, protecting each other's vulnerable spots. That's advanced tactical positioning, a specialist said, stunned. That behavior doesn't emerge until 12 months minimum. Emerges faster when they feel safe enough to focus on learning instead of survival, Elena said. She stood and stretched. All right, babies. Who needs a bathroom break? Because I saw some of you doing the potty dance. They're toilet trained, Thornek asked faintly. Working on it. They're smart. They pick stuff up fast when you teach instead of just expecting them to figure it out through trial and error. Elena headed toward a corner she'd designated for waste elimination. The cubs followed in an orderly line. Good babies. We go potty in the designated area, and then everyone gets treats. Varix watched Thornek's face cycle through a dozen expressions. Shock, confusion, reluctant acceptance, and finally, something that might have been hope. She's right, Thornek said finally. About all of it. We've been sacrificing our own children on the altar of tradition, calling it strength. He turned to his specialists. Document everything. Every technique, every behavior, every result. I'm taking this to the council personally. They'll resist, one specialist warned. Let them. I have proof. Thornek gestured at the bay. Look at those cubs. Look at their development. The data doesn't lie. Our way produces 43% survival. Her way produces this. Elena returned with the cubs, each one clearly healthier than they'd been hours ago. Fuller bodies, brighter eyes, confident movements instead of aggressive desperation. You're going to revolutionize your entire empire's approach to child rearing, Yvette said to Elena. Do you understand that? I showed them how to not abuse babies, Elena corrected. If that's revolutionary, your galaxy has bigger problems than I thought. She yawned. Speaking of which, it's been like 14 hours. I need coffee, and these babies need nap time. We've got a schedule to keep. A schedule, Thornek repeated. Yeah, consistent routine. Babies thrive on predictability. Elena started herding cubs toward a nest of blankets she'd constructed. Nap time, then playtime, then learning time, then dinner, then quiet time, then bed. Same every day. They feel secure when they know what's coming. The cubs settled into the blanket nest with minimal fuss, arranging themselves in a protective cluster. Elena sat beside them, and they immediately adjusted to include her in their formation. She's part of their pack now, a specialist said. Fully integrated. They'll defend her with their lives. Good, Elena said drowsily, already half asleep herself. Because I'm definitely defending them. 3 months later, Varric stood in the station's observation deck watching Elena lead a group of Kython specialists through what she called Cub Care 101. The 12 cubs, now noticeably larger, healthier, and infinitely more coordinated, demonstrated hunting exercises that looked suspiciously like games of tag. Thornak stood beside him, reviewing data on a holographic display. The Empire Council has authorized conversion of 47 cub facilities to Elena's protocols. Initial results show survival rates increasing to 79%. Cognitive development is accelerating across all test groups. And the traditionalists? Furious, but they can't argue with results. Thornak closed the display. We're estimating within 2 generations, our population will increase by 38%. All because a human plumber told us we were doing it wrong. Elena's voice drifted up from below. No, gentle mouths. We don't bite our friends, even in play. Good redirection. Yes, you're such smart babies. She's returning to Earth next month, Varric said. Says she's got pipes to fix back home. We've offered her a position as cultural liaison. Full ambassadorial status. She declined. Of course she did. Thornak's mandibles quirked in what might have been amusement. She said, and I quote, "I'm a plumber, not a nanny, but I'll visit for holidays because someone's got to make sure you're not backsliding." Below, Tiny, now the group's emotional center rather than its weakest link, brought Elena a training tool. She praised him enthusiastically, and the other cubs chittered their approval. The cubs leave for their first socialization posting tomorrow, Thornak said quietly. With proper handlers trained in Elena's methods, they'll be the first generation raised without blood trials, without starvation protocols, without culling. How do you feel about that? Terrified, hopeful. Thornak watched the cubs play. My entire life, I believed strength came from suffering, that we earned our place in the galaxy through hardship. Elena proved we were just hurting our children and calling it tradition. Elena looked up, caught them watching, and waved. Several cubs mimicked the gesture with their manipulators. She changed an empire's entire philosophy in 6 hours, Varric observed. No, Thornak corrected. She just showed us what love looks like. We did the changing ourselves. Below, Elena returned to teaching. Cubs clustered around her like she was the most natural thing in the galaxy, which Varric supposed she was. Just a human, just a plumber, just someone who understood that babies, any babies, deserved better than fear.